So this morning we are on the Stillaguamish River in outside of Arlington, outside of Oso. It's on the Mountain Loop Highway north of Seattle. And I came up here because I've had this vision in my head of this one certain tree out in this field with fog. Without fog, the branches between the tree and the trees behind it would get all jumbled up. And I thought with some fog in the mix, it could be a really interesting photo. Problem, the fog this morning has been intermittent. And two, I can't find the tree. So I decided to just go ahead and stop. There's a wonderful bike trail that runs along the Stillaguamish called the Whitehorse Trail. And so I decided to pull off on one of the parking areas and meander along, and my car's right there, and I saw the fog along the Stillaguamish here, and just I like how the fog and this is where the battery in my video camera died. You miss out on several minutes of exposition on the wonderful image I was creating, and I had no idea. It just died. I thought I had enough battery in that battery life in that battery to continue on for the several minutes that I was talking. But yeah, didn't happen that way. And so we miss out on what I was talking about and how I was creating the image. But I did take 3 images at the time, and I will go ahead and talk about them and the reasons why I made the changes I did in them. For this first image, I went with just a basic horizontal image. I was using my 50 to 300 lens and basically had it at about 70 or so. And I liked this image because it was the bend of the river, had the fog, the forest. But what was bothering me about this is just there's so much white space there in the middle, and it just is overpowering. There's just no oomph factor here. I was also a little disturbed by the tree that was encroaching on the left and the big old root ball that was on the sandbar. So I decided to try and zoom in on that tree that's on the right that's leaning out into the river. On the second image, I went ahead and zoomed in, still kept it as a horizontal image, and really tried to show the tree that was coming out over the river. You still get a bit of the bend of the river, but again, this just lacked some oomph factor. There's still so much white from the fog, and the banks on the left, the bank of the river on the left, just seems disembodied and not, you just don't know what it is and know where it's going. I like the trees in the background. I like the trees on the left that are giving that one tree that's leaning out an anchor. But beyond that, I just wasn't liking this image very much. Finally, I was able to compose an image that I was much happier with. I cut out all that extraneous foofery and just really focused on that tree that was leaning out over the river. You still get a bit of the bend of the river, but I liked that tree, and I liked those other trees that were giving it an anchor. And that's what I decided to zoom in on. And I went ahead with a vertical composition on this, just so I could cut out that extra stuff that was going on. We don't have as much white. I do like as much white as there is. I do like it much better because it's not overpowering of the image. What you really are able to focus in on and what you're really able to see is the forest of alder and that one tree leaning out over the river. And so after I got that last image, I realized that my battery died and changed the battery. So let's go ahead and continue on with the great adventure on the Whitehorse Trail on the Stillaguamish.
thought it'd be quite interesting because we're right next to the road, walking along the Whitehorse Trail. And, you know, it's winter time and the trees are just absolutely gorgeous right now. And the forest we're walking through is mostly red alder, and here comes more cars. And, but it's mostly red alder, big leaf maple, and actually behind you there's cottonwood too. So, but just walking along, looking at the trees, looking at the shapes of them, and I saw these smaller saplings in front of this big leaf maple, and the saplings are the red maple. So they've got white bark and they've got some mosses on them, which are nice and bright. And then the big leaf maple behind it is nice and dark. So it kind of gives a nice contrast separation. And I've got an image set up where those smaller saplings are front and center, and they're zoomed right in. There's not a lot around them. I've got my post up a little bit because when I'm down further, I'm getting too much sky. There's some bits of sky peeking through in the background that I don't want. So again, I'm going to be able to crop this and crop most of it out if my post is up. So that's why my post is up. Usually don't like putting it up too often, especially like around traffic or anything, because there's some movement that can happen with it. But I think we'll be okay. I'm actually opened up a lot wider. I'm at 5.6, f5.6, and which again, it leaves me at 1/20th of a second. I've again have 2-second timer on, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this. I think this is kind of a interesting image. There's enough haze in the background that kind of helps diminish the busyness of the background, and I think yeah, I think this is going to be kind of a fun image. I'll show it to you now. What I have in front of me is a vine maple. It's an old vine maple, and vine maples are more of a shrubby type of a tree, and they have lots of, you know, trunks that come out of one big root ball, and they're very viney, hence the name vine maple. They kind of look viney. They aren't really viney, but they kind of look viney because you get in some of the old growth forests and you have these trees that just arch over the trails, and they're vine maples, but they're gorgeous. They make beautiful tunnels on trails. Again, we're still next to the road, so apologize for the traffic, but I wanted to talk about a couple of things. I'm gonna what I love about this one is it has just this nice almost straight line of trunks going across, and I'm thinking a panorama of these would be really kind of cool, and being able to zoom in really close, so that's all you see is just like a letterbox of trunks put together, and they're all filled with moss and just absolutely gorgeous, and there's some light on it, so it ought to be really, really pretty. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is being able to zoom in. Now, you probably noticed the last couple images I've been using my long lens, and I actually, when I'm in the forest, I prefer my long lens. Why? Because I can zoom in really close to some of the details of the forest. I can see a tree off in the distance, and instead of tramping through to that tree, especially once you get close to it, it's not as pretty as it was where you were on the trail. If I use my zoom lens, I can help isolate that tree. I can help get, that it'll help be able to photograph that tree, capture that tree the way I see it and the way I want it. So a lot of times when I'm in the forest, this is my go-to lens. It's 50 to 300, and it's a mount for my Sony A65, and I really like using this lens, and that's my go-to lens in the forest. So if you have a long lens and you really haven't pulled it out for forest photography, I really advise you to try doing it. It really does help get some of the really cool details of the forest. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this panorama. I think it's going to be about 4 or 5 images across, probably more like 5. And one of the tricks that you learn from some of the guys who do a lot of these is that to start off your pano, you just take a picture of it, basically your hand, and then you know where the panorama starts. So in case you're taking in, several different panoramas, you don't get the images that you want to stitch together mixed up. So I'm on F7 because I want a little bit more distance. I want to make sure I'm getting front and back on these trunks, and I am much closer to these trunks than I was, photographing from across the street, which takes me down to 0.4 seconds. So it's a little bit longer. 2-second timer is on to minimize shake. And there's the first image. And I've also got it manually focused. This really helps if you've got some distance between elements in your photograph that you're trying to do a pano on, so that if it's on autofocus, it'll keep trying to focus, and then your focus points are off throughout the images, and you don't want that. And then I overlap just a bit. So I started off with a tree trunk that goes this way, and that tree trunk is still in the frame, but it's off to the left now. Another image. Move. And so basically when I'm overlapping, what is on the right of the frame is now going to be on the left of the frame. And that gives the computer and me some ability to figure out what goes where. And it looks like it's probably going to be more of a 6 image panorama, because I am wanting to get quite a bit of overlap on his. The other thing that's kind of weird about this image is I've got a lot of bright areas and a lot of dark areas. So I've got it more focused, the exposure setting is more for the dark areas. I find it easier to adjust the exposure in Photoshop if the dark areas aren't completely black. So, and I don't really care because about the highlights, they're there. They're not non-existent. There's no detail in there. I don't want anything there. So it's okay that, I do have some shadows back there, but it's really, the highlights only help emphasize the trunks. So we've got those images, and I'll go ahead when I get back. And then, I'm going to take one more, just bring it over here, just to be on the safe side. So I have enough room to crop. And then again, I'm going to photograph my hands. And that tells me that's the end of that pano series. What you find on the trail in the forest is great. Down to limb, and it has a whole bunch of lichens and mosses, liverworts. I mean, just really cool, and lots of great textures and details. So I've got an image set up, and the the limb itself is kind of going on a diagonal because I find it's more vibrant that way. You know, there's more energy in diagonal lines. So I've got the branch kind of going diagonal, and this nice, wonderful mess of lichens and liverworts, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. It's got it at f8. I will probably be getting the background in clear focus too, which is fine. There's not much background. I've really tried to isolate this little patch of green and brown and textures and coolness and yumminess and loveliness. And so it's at f8 and it's a quarter of a second. And yeah, I'll go ahead and put that on the screen now. I think you're gonna like it. You know, I'm gonna go ahead and end this video here. I haven't really gone that far on this trail, and I'm gonna continue walking down the trail. In fact, I'm already seeing an image over there. But I just wanted to reiterate that when you're going out in the forest, go ahead and put your longer lens on, because you will find some really delicious images that your long lens will help you capture, and it'll be able to help you isolate your images from the clutter that surrounds in the forest. This is a great trail. I'm glad I came up today. We've got fog setting in. I don't know if I'm going to talk to you about any more photos. We'll see. But at this point, yeah, let's just go ahead and end this here. We've gotten 4 really cool images, and I will see you on the next adventure. Bye.